Hi, sorry, so we can get started. I'm just gonna ask everyone to mute your mic and turn your cameras once again, please. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being patient as we kind of got everything sorted out with the host situation. My name is Rebecca Balakrishnan. I'm a career consultant from University of Manitoba. And in today's session, we're going to be talking about how to make a career plan. So basically, today we're going to be looking through a few different tips and tricks that I use when I'm working with students to help them think about who you are, what you enjoy, what you're passionate about, and really thinking about how those things you know about yourself can actually connect to occupations that you might want to do in the future. I'd love to get to know a little bit about all of you. So maybe in the chat, if anybody wants to share some ideas that you've had. So if you have ideas about your career that you're thinking of, feel free to pop them into the chat. I'd love to know if you're thinking about university or that you're not interested in that, or maybe college. I'd love to get a little bit of a sense of where you're at in your career plans, or if you're just wide open and trying to figure stuff out. So just pop that in the chat, and that way I can make sure that our conversation today is a little more tailored to what you guys are interested in. If you're not familiar with Teams, if you move your mouse over the screen, you should see a little bar at the bottom of it where you have the option of a little chat box. And if you click that, you can see it. But I think there should be some notifications because we've been putting things in. I'm just going to pop, because I noticed a few people are newer in. So I'm just going to pop the handout package again into the chat. Go, so that you have that if you missed it. Copy link. All right, there you go. So feel free to download that. That's going to have some resources we're going to use today. All right. So yeah, any point, please feel free to pop in any information into the chat. I'd really love to know more about you guys. So feel free to let me know your career ideas. But otherwise, I'll just get started and I'll take a look at that. Also, feel free to pop questions in there or raise your hand and use your mic to chat as well. I'm really love to interact with you guys as much as possible during our session today. All right. Sorry, my computer is frozen. I'm just trying to go to my next slide here, but it's giving me the nice little, there we go. Has anyone ever been asked this awful question? What do you want to do when you grow up? It's the kind of question I know sometimes you get cornered about at a family event or, you know, asked kind of that common question. A lot of people get asked, and sometimes it feels really stressful. Like I know when I was younger, I would just like say something so that I had an answer. Other times it can feel a little overwhelming because you're not sure, you're feeling confused, and it can be stressful to have that pressure on you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that. And one thing that I always talk about in career planning is that you don't actually need to have an answer to this question. And in fact, a lot of people that are like way later in their careers than you still don't know what they want to be when they grow up. And that's okay, because they're still growing and exploring, and there's so much room to change that being able to give one specific answer of a job title, especially when you're in high school, is kind of like a trick question. And it's not really fair. Oh, we've got some answers in the chat here. So feel free, anyone else who wants to share. Got an idea of an English or history degree, then maybe law school. Yeah, that's a really cool one. Those degrees work really nicely with law for sure. And we'll look at some other stuff that's similar to law today as well. And I'll show you how you can open up a little, because it sounds like you're like, maybe not 100% sure. So I'll show you some other ideas for that too. That's cool. All right. Sorry, every time I click the next slide, it takes like a really long time to change. All right, so what is a career consultant? Basically, what I do is I help people figure out what they're doing with their life. So if you don't know what you're doing with your life, you are in the right place, and hopefully we can help you get a little bit of direction today. And why bother with this kind of a conversation at any point? If it, like I said at the beginning, if it's really challenging to put one job title on your future and really stick with it, and that's not really the reality most of the time, why bother with this whole career planning thing? The reason I think this is so important is because when we have at least a direction of where we're going, we have some ideas in mind, a lot of the time students feel way more motivated. You can kind of be thoughtful about getting experiences that are in line with your interests so you can explore it a little bit more. And sometimes it feels like if you know why you're taking a math class, if it's maybe you're struggling with a class and you're like, no, I'm going to work really hard at this class because I know that I need it to get into the program that I want, or I know that I'm going to use it in my job that I really want to have one day. So sometimes that's the other reason, to kind of push you forward to know why you're doing what you're doing in school. As I said, though, you don't need to know right now. And it's actually really possible to move forward in your education and in your career without having a clear, exact job title that you're headed towards. What I like to think about is just thinking about the direction you're heading. So imagining your kind of a general idea so that at least you can move forward and do the research required to make sure that you're taking the right classes for those ideas you have, and kind of not canceling any of those ideas out by missing out on opportunities. I know that can be really hard because people do want to have an idea. Most of the time when I work with students, they're like, no, I just want to have one thing and I want to go for it and I want to just go towards it and it'll be easy, straight line. But in reality, that's really tough to do. Another way I like to think about career is in terms of what the world needs. At this point in time, we're really seeing how much that can change, right? How the world can grow and evolve and how all kinds of different factors come together to change the way our labor market is and what's needed. And some jobs right now, of course, are in huge demand, right, as we address all of the things that are going on in our world. So that's another way to think about it, is what are the problems that exist in our society right now? And then what jobs or what ways could you in your career address those problems that you're passionate about? So that's another way of thinking about career planning that I like to think about. So to kind of simplify this a little bit more, when I work with students, I like to look at 4 pieces of you. So you've got subject preferences. So this is great because if you're in high school, probably a huge amount of what you know about yourself in terms of occupations probably is about the subjects you like and what you're good at and what you hate, right? And what's really cool is a lot of occupations can be connected directly to subjects. I'll show you an example here. Let me just pull it up on the screen here. This is in your handout package if you want to check it out. But it's a ONET resource where you can actually search by knowledge area. So if you really enjoy fine art, for example, if that's your best subject, you can click on that, and it's super cool because it actually gives you a list of jobs that are related to fine art. So if that's what you're passionate about, you can get a list of occupations related to it. And of course, there's tons of other subject areas as well. So that's one really good way for you to generate some ideas. Feel free to pop into the chat if you want me to click on any of these or talk about any occupations about your favorite subject. So just let me know. Another common thing that students tell me is that they want to avoid a particular subject. And usually that's pretty doable at some point as well. If you really hate a particular area, by the time you get into post-secondary, it's usually pretty straightforward to, for example, if you really hated chemistry, to just not pick a job or a program that includes that. So that's really nice. We can also combine occupations in really cool ways. Like if you really love biology, but you're also into psychology and working with people, there's some cool jobs in healthcare like occupational therapy or physical therapy where you need to know about both of those subjects. So we can kind of combine them in cool ways. Or if you like psychology and computers, something like artificial intelligence might be interesting to you. The other way I like to look at occupations is by your interests. So interests are the things that you enjoy doing. So it can be something like your hobbies, your favorite sports, what you enjoy doing with your friends, the things that you do and that let you lose track of time, or you really feel engaged in what you're doing. Even, what you like to watch on YouTube or Netflix can be interesting, right? If a lot of the time you're watching healthcare dramas, I mean, that's a pretty big hint that maybe you're interested in healthcare, and that could be an area that you head into in your career. So that's something to think about as well. We're going to talk about in just a moment a really cool assessment that helps you think about your interests. Then we have personality. So personality is, a lot of different ways of measuring that. So common one that you might have heard about before is if you're an introvert or an extrovert, right? That can be really helpful in terms of figuring out occupations, because if you're someone who's more introverted, or you prefer working in an environment where you're more, one-on-one with people or working independently, versus someone who might be more extroverted and really needs to be engaging with people all day to really feel like they're doing something meaningful. That's important information, right? Because the extrovert would be really sad, sitting alone in their office all day, and that wouldn't be a good job for you if that's what you're looking for in work. So that's really important as well. And then finally, there's your career values. So values are the things that help you get out of bed in the morning and go to work. The things that make your work feel like they're meaningful, that you're doing something of value for the world. They can be things like how much money you want to make, or feeling like you're helping society, or having a job that's secure, or that has intellectual stimulation. All of those different components come into play when we're thinking about our career values. So this that is up on your screen right now is called a Holland Code. So I love the Holland Code for helping us figure out about you. So really, Holland Codes are personality assessments that look at interests. And they're used a lot by career professionals because they can connect your personality directly to occupations. So what psychologists did is they went out and they surveyed thousands and thousands of people who love their job, and they found out their type, or what we call a Holland Code. And we found out what those types were. And the idea is, if you have a similar type to people in that occupation, you might like that job too. And what's cool about it is it's not like it just gives you one job. It gives you lots of jobs that have those similar interest areas. So I'm going to talk you through the 6 different pieces of the Holland Code. And I want you to listen and think about which pieces sound the most like you. And then I'd love to hear in the chat which ones are most interesting. In the handout package that I sent, I notice there's a lot of people popping in, so I'm just gonna pop the handout package back into there. In that handout package, you can download a little worksheet that has information on how to access the Holland Code. So there's a free checklist in there, and there's also an assessment. So if you wanted to go a little further, but right now we'll just walk through and think about which one sounds the most like you. So if you are realistic in the Holland Code, that means you're someone who's more hands-on. So realistic people prefer work that's tangible, where you're not stuck in a desk all day. They prefer working with tools and equipment, and like to see that they've produced something as part of their work. If you're realistic, some things you might enjoy doing are sports, working with machinery, wood shops class, like cars, building with Lego, that kind of stuff would be, or cooking too. All of that would be kind of hands-on stuff that you might enjoy. Investigative people are research oriented. So if you're investigative, you're someone who just loves to learn, you love gathering as much information about a particular topic as you possibly can. You're someone who might really like school. And things you might enjoy beyond school would be things like science fairs or heritage fairs or different things where you get to just learn a lot about a particular topic. For work, you might be interested in a job that lets you be an expert. That might be something you're really interested in. Artistic people are our creatives. So if you're artistic, you are maybe creative in a traditional sense. So you might enjoy things like drawing and music and other types of art, dance, acting, stuff like that. But you could also be artistic in a less traditional way, so that you just think about the world in a more open-ended way. You prefer like expressing ideas and thinking about things and solving problems creatively. Then we have social people. So if you're social, you're one of the helpers. So you would really enjoy work that allows you to teach, heal, support, listen to others. You probably are the person in your friend group that people go to when they're stressed and they need someone to talk to. You might do things like volunteer at a hospital or enjoy like peer tutoring kind of things. Would be some activities that would be considered social if you enjoy them. Next up, we have enterprising. So enterprising people are our influencers. So if you're enterprising, you are really comfortable taking charge of situations. You are the person in the group project that is delegating tasks and making sure everything is going well. You might be really comfortable with taking risks in situations, and you're really good at persuading others to go along with your ideas. Some things you might do if you're enterprising for fun would be, if you're like, take on leadership roles in sports that you're involved in, student council, clubs that you're involved in, taking leadership roles, as well as some areas of social media can be really enterprising, like some of that marketing, persuasive kind of stuff if you're into looking at like analytics on your TikTok or something like that. And then we have conventional. So conventional people are really seeking work that allows them to be in a structured environment. They're really organized and careful, and they're good at when you give someone who's conventional like a problem to solve, they're great at like making it way more efficient, putting it into like a clear, detail-oriented, effective way. Often they're really good with data and those kinds of things. So if you're conventional, you are probably super duper organized, and you really enjoy things like sometimes math can be one that people enjoy, or like administrative work and things like that. So I'd love it if anybody could pop into the chat which pieces of these sound most like you, if you're social, investigative, artistic, etc. Because it'd be cool to get a little survey of the room and see where you're all at. And what's kind of cool about this is you also don't have to just pick one. Most people are about 3 of these. So, and I'll show you some examples of that on the next slide. If it ever comes up. There we go. All right, so this is some examples of occupations by Holland Code, and I've included a huge variety of things that would require a whole variety of different levels of education. So as you can see, when you kind of look at these, you've got stuff over in the investigative category, and they're not just investigative, right? They also have other parts of code with them. So sometimes people, maybe investigative is your most dominant, but you're also realistic, which means you're super hands-on, and conventional, which means you're really good at like more procedural types of detail-oriented things, which makes sense for someone like a forensic lab technologist, which needs to know tons of information about science in order to do their job well. But it is a hands-on job, and it's very procedural and detail-oriented, because we don't want forensic lab techs being too creative and wild with samples, right? They need to really be by the book and tidy and make sure everything is going according to plan. We've got some realistic occupations up on the screen. If realistic is your dominant area, a lot of the time that's where you're looking into some occupations that are at the college level or other areas like that. So we've got stuff, like a lot of the trades are realistic dominant. So if you really want to work with your hands, those are awesome areas for you to be exploring. So some examples we have on the screen, we've got carpenter, camera operator, firefighter, surgeon, civil engineering technologist, just to give you some examples. Artistic occupations, you can see that as soon as artistic is in the front, we're really seeing people being in very creative jobs like graphic designers and musicians. Under social, we've got, of course, this one's sometimes a little more obvious to people, some things like social work and teaching, but some other ones maybe you haven't heard about or thought about, like a volunteer manager or a recreation therapist. Got some conventional ideas like legal assistants, computer programming, and then over in enterprising, a lot of business jobs come up in here, of course, but we also see stuff in other industries like museum curator or school principal, right? Because even in a school, like you think of that, like, yeah, that person's a teacher, but they're the leader, right? So they obviously have that enterprising component to them as well. Okay, so Mila is realistic and artistic. That's interesting. I think sometimes that one can be definitely, does carpentry have, oh, I guess depending on it, some like woodworking and stuff like that, more creative stuff would be realistic and artistic. We'd also see that coming together in some of the stuff like graphic design, like artisan work would have that as well, if that's something you're interested in, which can be kind of cool. All right, I'm gonna go to the next slide. And if you're interested in trying this out, in the handout I gave you, I'll just put it up on the screen so you can see it. I did put a link to this Find Your Holland code. So you can take like the actual assessment and it'll pop out some ideas for you of occupations. So that's something I'd encourage you to give a try if you'd like, to go into this a little bit deeper. And you can see more occupations related to your code as well. Another way that we can explore occupations is by sector. So the National Occupational Classification is a Government of Canada resource where they've sorted out occupations by different areas. So you can search if you're interested. I know sometimes people are able to say like an area they're interested in. Like they're like, well, I don't know what I want to do, but I know that I'm interested in doing a job related to science. Or I'm not sure what I want to do, but I know it's something related to arts because I know I'm into that. So those are some things to think about. I'll show you a cool resource for exploring this. It's in your handout package as well. Let me just pull it up on the screen for you. So one thing that we did that you can play around with is we've organized occupations by industry. So one thing that you can do on our website is to explore different jobs. So for example, if you're interested in business, finance, and administration, we've listed a whole bunch of jobs by that. And it's a cool activity because you can kind of go through different jobs related to that area you're interested in. And you could actually click in on them and it gives you more information about what they do. So, and you can see on this website, we've got information about your Holland code as well. So if you're like, oh yeah, I was enterprising, so this actually makes a lot of sense. And it gives you information about what that job is and different resources for you to read and research a little more about it. So finding out what occupation, educational information you need, labor market, all kinds of great resources, as well as similar occupations. So if you're into this one, you're into this purchasing manager kind of role, you might also be looking at stuff like supply chain or management consulting or finance. So that's one way to explore, right? Looking at who you are and what you know about yourself right now. But the other thing that can be really helpful if you're kind of looking through these different things that I'm talking to you about, and you're still like, I don't even know if I'm social or not. I don't know if I'm enterprising or not. Like I've never really tried doing anything that lets me figure that out. Like I don't know. And I know for most of the students that I work with, one of the biggest things that helps them figure out what they're doing is to just go and experience more things. That's where sometimes it's great to talk about subjects, because you've done a lot of experiencing of subjects, right? You've taken so many classes, you've really gotten information on those different areas that you've experienced through your high school career. So you've learned about that, which is awesome. But it's important to also learn about stuff outside the classroom, because it'll help you figure things out. So one thing you can do is volunteer, get part-time jobs, things like that. And that often can be a big factor in helping you figure out what you're doing. When you volunteer, get involved in different things, you quickly realize what you like and you don't like, right? Like if, for example, you work at a summer camp, for me, this was super helpful. I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher for a really long time, and it seemed like the perfect idea for me. Everything about me seemed like I'd be a great kindergarten teacher. And then I met some 5-year-olds, and I found out that that's not a good fit for me. I loved them, but I realized very quickly that it wasn't something I could see myself doing all day, every day for years and years, right? I quickly learned that. And that's why getting involved in stuff can be so helpful, because you figure out what you like, but also what you want to avoid, right? You also get to meet people. So when you get involved in these things, like you meet other people that are interested in the same things as you, and maybe some people that are already doing this work as a job, right? And then you get to learn a little bit more about what's possible and what's out there. And get advice from people that are already working in that industry while you build skills too, right? Volunteering is also great because it helps you to get your first job eventually, because you've got some stuff to put on your resume. So I want to show you some resources of how you can learn about occupations. As I already said, volunteering is a really good way to learn, because, I'm sure volunteer programs in hospitals aren't happening right now, but if you're interested in healthcare, that's a really good place to volunteer, right? Because when I was in high school volunteering in a hospital, I got to see tons of people in healthcare working, and I got to meet patients and learn about the diverse people that they're supporting. And that helped me think about if that would be a good occupation for me or not. The other thing that I love using is the U of M Occupations Library. I already kind of showed you it, but I want to show you it from a different angle. That's not it. 1 second. So our occupations library, like I already kind of showed you, has really good information about lots of different occupations. So that's a good place to start if you want to learn more. You can see we've got a huge diversity of occupations on our page, where we include information about educational requirements and stuff like that. So this is a good place to start if you're trying to compare different occupations. Another really good resource that'll also have a little more diversity. Some of the stuff on our page is a little more university focused, even though we do have jobs on there that don't require university, is Alice by Alberta. This is all linked in your handout package. I really love this resource because you can find information. Let's just go into Admin Assistant. There's information about education. Of course, it's Alberta, so just use your imagination of the equivalent in Manitoba for the schools that they're talking about, how much money they make, lots of really good information about interests, work conditions, skills required, and there's often videos where they interview people in the field. So this is a really cool one to explore when you're doing your research, which can be really helpful. I also like looking at job postings, because that can be helpful too. When you look at a job posting, it tells you what types of education is required or experiences are required for that job. So if you look at a job posting, that's also a really important piece of information you can use. Of course, the other thing you're going to want to think about is admissions info for schools that you're thinking of attending. So talk to your guidance counselors or teachers if you need help finding this information. And most schools will also have recruiters or admissions folks that you can also ask questions of, as well as most websites have lots of great information on them for the school about what high school courses you need to take in order to get into specific programs. So make sure you're checking that out too, because you don't want to miss your opportunity to, if you need to take pre-cal, for example, for the program you're interested in, you don't want to miss that opportunity to take it while you're in high school while it's still free for you to access. I'm just going to zip ahead a little because I already showed you all of these pieces. Oh, and the other really good resource I just want to show you quickly is from Manitoba. Hold on, let me open up the page so I can show you it a little bit better here. It's called setyourcourse.ca. You might have already used this before, but this is a good Manitoba resource if you're looking at educational requirements, where you can find information about lots of schools in Manitoba. You can explore by educational pathways and the different institutions that are out there. And then there's also information on career planning. So you can look up different occupations on here and see the educational requirements for them and a little bit of information about them as well. So that's another really good Manitoba resource that you can use to do some exploring. All right. I'm just going to skip this activity, but if you're interested in trying it out, I did put a link to this in the handout booklet. I'll show you it quickly so I can just give you some info on what the activity is. So if you're interested, you can definitely try it on your own. So I already told you a little bit about career values. Career values are really helpful for us to think about where you're headed in your career, because they can really anchor us in what really matters to us. So if you decide to use this activity that's linked in the handout, it's kind of cool. You can take all these different cards and really think about which of these are most important. So for example, I've got adventure up on the screen. So that's a career value. And I want to think about, okay, how important is it for me to have a job that's exciting or risky, where I deal with hazards and uncertainty? And for me, I do not want that. So I'm going to put it in not important. And then I can kind of play through all of these and think about, okay, intellectual stimulation, that's super important to me. And then I might put that in a very important column. And just kind of go through and think about how these might fit in for you. And what I love about career values and doing this is that when you're doing your research, it's so valuable to go back to your career values and think about if the jobs that you're exploring and you're thinking about are actually meeting these interests for you. So for example, if I know that it's really important for me to have work-life balance, I'd want to be doing some research on that occupation and think about, is this going to be a job that is really overwhelming, where I'm going to be working super long hours? Or is it one that is actually going to be more, give me more time for my family? Or location, that might be really important to you, right? And if I want to live in a community, one of the most important things for me is to stay in the community that I'm living in right now, that's going to really impact my career decision, because certain industries aren't located in all areas, right? If you really want to get into some areas of like biomedical engineering, Winnipeg definitely has a small market for that, but a lot of people end up moving to other urban centers if they're really interested in furthering their career in that area. So that's something that is important to think about for sure. So this is a cool one for you to kind of compare occupations and see if they're really living up to those things, because sometimes something makes sense for you in terms of what you're interested in. You might enjoy doing it, but your values make it so that that actually isn't a good fit for you and what you're looking for. So yeah, you can find that linked in the handout if you want to play around with it, and use that as an exploration tool and comparison as well. And I like doing this as well. This is something that can also ground conversations you have as well. Can be really helpful. All right, I'm just gonna skip through this. The slide's just, if you decided to go to university, most degrees can take you to lots of different paths, is basically what that slide was about. But let's talk about courses, because I know that that for a lot of people in high school can be a really important factor. So when you're doing your research, it'll be important for you to think about what educational options are required. But a lot of the time what you'll notice is that it's not so black and white as you've got one degree or one program, and that's the only pathway to get to a particular area. A lot of the time, if you do go to university, the one degree can take you to lots of different jobs, as well as college level programs as well. Sometimes people end up in really interesting places with a particular educational path that you wouldn't expect. I was speaking with a dental hygienist who ended up being an office manager, and her training was in dental hygiene, but she was able to become like more of a business person, which was really interesting, because it's not a straight line, and just because you pick a program doesn't mean you're going to be in that particular thing for the rest of your life, which is really cool. If you are interested in exploring this way, I'll show you one more resource as well, which is our career planner. So this is another one for exploring by subject area if you're interested in it. This is, again, I'm sorry, it's a university resource, but if you wanted to look by subjects, that other resource I showed you earlier will also do that, and it will be a little more inclusive than this resource is. But what's cool about it is, for example, if we click on it, getting an Italian degree, and then it's going to give us, it'll load, it'll give us information about that particular degree. And of course, it's U of M information, but if you're going to another university, it's the same. Just don't pay attention to the course information. What you want to pay attention to is the sample jobs that are related to that. So you can learn more about it that way. So that's another cool resource for you to play around with. All right. So yeah, do your research, sample courses, keep your options open. A lot of the time, grades do matter when you're going into post-secondary. So that's something to think about, just to try to do your best and access all the resources that you can, and ask for help if you need it in order to do your best academically. Of course, there's lots of programs as well that have wait lists to get in, and you just have to meet a minimum requirement. They're not necessarily competitive to get into. So that's something to consider as well when you research different programming and things like that. If you do require post-secondary for an idea that you want to pursue, make sure you're taking those right courses and getting the minimum required grades. And sometimes if you are, like I know at the beginning we had the idea of like a lawyer, right? Like we know that one can be a competitive one in terms of grades to get into. So sometimes what people like to do as well is parallel planning, which is where we're thinking about other things that are similar. So for example, some stuff that's similar to law would be being like an advocate, a labor relations officer, policy analyst, going into areas of government and politics. So sometimes we can also keep other ideas open with like similar degree paths so that we can still be happy with where we end up without having to decide anything for sure. So kind of as we end today, I want to leave a moment here for if anyone has any questions. But I want you, at least for yourself, to think about one goal today. So your goal might be that you want to create try some of those assessments that I sent to you. A goal might be that you're going to look into volunteering somewhere that you're interested in, or trying a new class next year that'll help you explore your interests. So I just want you to think about one thing that you could do. to help you explore. And I'm just glad that you're kind of coming to this career fair today, because I think there's going to be lots of opportunities. And I'd encourage you to go talk to the different institutions and employers and professionals that are here today, because that's honestly some of the best ways that you can learn about what's out there, is to have really valuable conversations with people that are coming from those institutions that can give you specific advice of what it's like to do their job. So please feel free to pop into the chat if you have any questions. I'd love to help answer them or pass you to other resources that you can get in touch with to help you with your career decision making. So feel free, or if you want, you can turn your mic on if you want to talk to me. That would be nice too. Okay, here, Austin. Where can we find these links and resources? Here, I'll post that link one more time into the chat. 1 second. So this, hold on, let me copy it. This has a link to, this has the handout that I was mentioning that has all the links on it, and it also has a little Holland Code activity if you want to try it, is in there too. You're welcome. Any other questions? It's always so awkward when you're the only one with your mic on, so I'll just sit here and see if anyone wants to type anything. Give it just another moment. All right. Well, it was so great chatting with all of you today. I'm just going to pop my email into the chat as well. So if for some reason you can't access the slides or sorry, the handouts, or something happens with that, I'm just popping it into the chat. So, or if you just had a question and you're shy to ask it in front of everyone, feel free to send me an email and I'll try to help you out through that. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming. And what government jobs can you pursue with a law degree? That's a really good question. Law degrees are super, I mean, there'd be lawyer positions potentially at different levels of government. But law, I've also seen some really cool like business type roles and governance that you could definitely go into law. Like, I mean, a lot of times politicians will have law degrees. And I mean, policy would be a good fit for law for sure. International relations work you could probably get into. Lots of cool options for sure in government. But you don't necessarily need a law degree for that. You could do like a master's degree in policy or international development or something like that. All right. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. And I don't know if our volunteer has anything that you need to say to close us off for the day. All right, I'm going to stay in the chat. So if anybody has any other questions, I'm just going to turn my mic and my camera off, so it's a little slightly less awkward for me. But yeah, feel free to hop into the chat and I'll just be here for the next couple minutes if you have questions.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was a really great session.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. That was very nice.
If anyone has any questions, we still have about 7 minutes, I believe. So you can even unmute your mic now and ask the question if you'd like.
I think it might just be you and I now.
Oh, okay.
Do you know how many people there were?
I think there were about 14 people when we started, and there were more people joining in.
Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to figure out 1, 2, 3, 4. It's hard to count on the participants because it's like people leaving, people coming, people leaving.
Yeah.
Like
But I do remember when we started, there were 14 people.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. I guess I can just hang up then?
Yes, yes. And you can just stop the recording and end the meeting.
Oh, perfect. All right. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.